Turns out the phrase working late downtown had layers I never cared to decode. Like when your husband says it 3 nights a week for 2 years. What he actually means is maintaining a secret apartment on the 5th floor of your best friend's new building, complete with Whole Foods grocery runs and handholding that could make teenagers jealous. I'm Nora Ellis, 34 years old, director of marketing at a mid-sized tech firm in Charlotte. Up until last Tuesday, sometime around 6 in the evening, I thought I had this whole adulting thing figured out. 8 years married to Grant, a decent house in the suburbs with the obligatory 2-car garage, a weekend brunch routine that involved overpriced avocado toast and even more overpriced mimosas. The kind of life that looks perfect on Christmas cards but feels hollow once January arrives. But this isn't about January. It's about that particular Tuesday in April when I decided to be a good friend and help Tessa unpack boxes in her new 10th floor apartment downtown. Tessa, my college roommate turned lifelong best friend, had just landed a stunning loft conversion in one of those renovated buildings that used to be an old textile factory. Very Charlotte, very trendy, and very close to destroying my entire life. The unpacking went well. We spent about 3 hours arranging her furniture, debating whether the couch looked better facing the windows or the exposed brick wall, and drinking wine straight from the bottle because we couldn't find the glasses she'd packed. Classic Tessa. Classic us. I actually felt good about myself, helpful, supportive, present. All the things women's magazines insist make you a decent person. Then I called the elevator to go home. You have to understand something about elevator rides. They're supposed to be dull. A few awkward glances between strangers, someone scrolling on their phone with the volume too high, maybe a cough or two. They are not supposed to be the moment your entire marriage shatters like a piñata filled with lies and organic groceries. The elevator stopped on the 5th floor. The doors slid open with that polite little ding that now echoes in my dreams. And there he was, my husband, Grant Ellis, 36 years old, wearing those dark jeans he claims make him look younger, and that gray Henley I'd bought him for his birthday. He was holding 2 Whole Foods bags in one hand. His other hand, oh, that one was occupied. Fingers intertwined, intimately and deliberately, with a tall brunette who looked like she did yoga every morning and probably had strong opinions about kombucha. They were laughing. Not polite coworker laughter, but that private kind that couples share when they believe the world has disappeared. She was teasing him about forgetting to grab the fancy cheese he liked, and he was joking about her obsession with overpriced grain bowls. It was sweet, almost adorable, the kind of scene that makes you want to throw up right where you stand. 3 seconds. That's how long it took for Grant's eyes to move from her face to mine. 3 seconds for his brain to register that his wife, his actual legal wife, was standing in the elevator he just stepped into with another woman holding his hand. His face changed color faster than a mood ring in a horror film. Red, white, gray, then something close to green. He dropped her hand like it had burned him and stepped back. A reflex that might have been funny if my world weren't imploding inside a descending metal box. And here's the best part, the perfect cherry on top of this disaster sundae. The brunette, blissfully unaware she had just walked into her boyfriend's personal apocalypse, looked at me in mild confusion and whispered to Grant, loud enough for me to hear. "Who is this? Who is this?" Like I was some stranger interrupting their Tuesday afternoon romance. Like I was the problem needing explanation. Grant's mouth opened and closed, gasping soundlessly like a fish out of water. What could he possibly say? "Oh hey honey. Funny seeing you here. This is Lena, my girlfriend. We've been living together part-time in apartment 5C for the past 2 years while you thought I was working late." The elevator continued to descend. 10th floor. 9th. 8th. Each ding marking another second of unbearable silence. Tessa's building suddenly felt enormous. Like we were in the Burj Khalifa instead of a converted factory in Charlotte, North Carolina. Lena, bless her clueless heart, started glancing between Grant and me, comprehension dawning slowly. You could see the gears turning, his panic, my shock, the awareness that something huge was unfolding, and she was only just realizing it. "Cal," she said softly, using a nickname I hadn't heard since high school. "What's going on?" 7th floor. 6th. 5th. The elevator slowed, and for one surreal second I thought Grant might bolt, grab his grocery bags and run like this was a sitcom where problems vanish if you move fast enough. But the doors opened to an empty 5th floor hallway, and nobody moved. We stood frozen. A perfect still life of suburban collapse. Me in my unpacking day athleisure. Grant in his casual date night costume. Lena, in her yoga teacher aesthetic, clutching organic vegetables like a shield. Nora, Grant finally managed, my name leaving his mouth like a confession. And there it was. The confirmation. The admission. The end of any illusion that this was somehow innocent. Lena's eyes widened. Wait, Nora? You're Nora? His Nora. Past tense already apparently. How considerate of her to phrase it that way. The doors closed again. 4th floor. 3rd. 2 more to go. I still hadn't said a word. My mind was too busy cataloging everything. The matching reusable bags, how natural they looked together. The fact that he was supposed to be in a client meeting across town according to the shared calendar that clearly meant nothing now. 2 years. 24 months. Working late downtown. That's what it had really meant all along. 730 days. That's how long my husband spent building an entirely separate life. 1 floor plan, 5 stories, and a few secrets away from where my best friend slept each night. The same apartment I must have walked past countless times after Tessa moved in. Completely unaware. The math alone was starting to hurt. The elevator reached the ground floor, its doors sliding open to reveal the lobby. All exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and an artisanal coffee shop tucked into the corner. The kind of stylish urban space that makes people feel cultured and sophisticated. I stepped out first, turned around and looked at the two of them, frozen guilty like teenagers caught sneaking in past curfew. Grant, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands. I'm going to drive home now. You have until I get there to decide which version of this story you want to try selling me. Choose wisely. I work in marketing. I know a pitch when I hear one. Then I walked away, leaving my husband, his girlfriend, and their organic groceries behind, probably still wondering how their perfectly curated Tuesday afternoon had gone so spectacularly off script. The walk to my car took 90 seconds. The drive home, 18 minutes. And somewhere in those 18 minutes, my shock started transforming into something else entirely. Sharper, colder, more deliberate. Because here's what Grant forgot during his 2-year performance. I don't just work in marketing. I excel at it. And if there's one thing I know better than anyone, it's how to craft a story people can't look away from. He wanted to play games? Fine. But he'd forgotten who he married. And that would be his first mistake of many. Driving in a daze does strange things to your brain. It starts replaying every red flag you ignored, every warning sign you brushed off. It's like watching a highlight reel of your own foolishness. Except there's no popcorn, and you're the punchline. Grant's car was already parked in the driveway when I pulled in. Of course it was. He'd probably broken every speed limit between downtown and our quiet suburb, frantically trying to come up with a defense that didn't sound completely delusional. Good luck with that, buddy. I've sat through enough crisis management meetings to know that there's no clever spin for, I have a second apartment beneath your best friends. I stayed in the car for a moment, watching through the kitchen window. He was pacing, running his hands through his hair. His usual nervous habit, as if messing it up could somehow organize his thoughts. Spoiler alert. It never did. When I finally went inside, he was standing by the kitchen island, the same one where we'd had breakfast that morning, where he'd kissed me goodbye before claiming to have back-to-back client meetings, where I'd reminded him to grab milk on his way home. The irony wasn't lost on me, considering what he'd actually picked up was organic produce for his second household. Nora, I can explain, he began, the worst possible opening line in the entire dictionary of betrayal. It ranks right up there with "it's not what it looks like," and "you're overreacting." I set my purse down neatly, took off my jacket, folded it over the chair with deliberate calm, and let the silence stretch, a tactic I'd perfected in negotiations. Whoever speaks first loses. He cracked after 45 seconds. She doesn't mean anything, he said. I laughed. A sharp, involuntary sound that escaped before I could stop it. The sheer audacity of that line, when he'd been playing house with this woman longer than some celebrity marriages last, was almost impressive. Oh, she doesn't mean anything? I repeated slowly, testing the words like they might make more sense out loud. The woman you've been seeing 3 nights a week for 2 years doesn't mean anything? The one whose hand you were holding like it was your lifeline. She doesn't mean anything? The woman you're grocery shopping with, Grant, And not just any groceries. Whole Foods groceries, which we both know cost at least 40% more. She doesn't mean anything. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Pattern was emerging. How long have you known? He finally asked. An interesting pivot, turning it into a question about my awareness rather than his betrayal. Classic misdirection. I found out. I glanced at my watch, exaggerating the gesture. Approximately 1 hour and 32 minutes ago. Right about when you and your new partner stepped into the elevator looking like a brochure for couples therapy success stories. Before that, I was blissfully ignorant, believing my husband was actually working when he said he was. Wild concept, I know. Grant started pacing again, tracing the same steps across the kitchen floor we'd chosen together 3 years ago. I remembered the debate, gray-veined marble or white quartz. We'd picked the quartz. Easier to maintain, he'd said. Less likely to stain. The irony was almost poetic. It just happened, he muttered finally, reaching for the oldest excuse in the book. As if tripping and falling could somehow result in a 2-year relationship, a leased apartment and a coordinated grocery list. It just happened? I echoed, tilting my head. What, did you slip on a banana peel and accidentally sign a lease? Fall into her bed repeatedly for 24 months? Please walk me through the physics of that accident because I'm genuinely curious. Don't be like this, he said, and I laughed again. That cold, bitter laugh you barely recognize as your own. Like what, Grant? Angry? Should I be calm and understanding instead? Maybe invite her over for coffee, so we can coordinate a timeshare schedule? You can stay with me Friday through Sunday, she can have you Monday through Thursday, and we'll sort out holidays through mediation? He actually looked wounded, as if I was the unreasonable one for not reacting with grace and gratitude. Where is she now? I asked suddenly. You're Lena, the woman who apparently doesn't know what a wedding ring means. Is she sitting in your little love nest wondering what's taking so long? Did you text her that your wife found out? The way his hand twitched toward his pocket told me everything I needed to know. Of course he'd texted her. Let me guess, I continued, unable to stop. You told her I was crazy, that we've been unhappy for years, that you were planning to leave me anyway, and now this just speeds things up. Am I close? His silence was all the confirmation I needed. I walked over to the coffee maker and started brewing a cup, the machine hissing and sputtering as if it, too, were fed up with his nonsense. He stood there, visibly scrambling for the right version of remorse. How did you even meet her? I finally asked. And for the first time all evening I was genuinely curious. Because I'm trying to understand the logistics here, I said. When exactly did you have time to meet someone, date someone, and establish an entire second residence? All while pretending to have a normal marriage? At a client event, he admitted quietly. About 2 years ago. She was doing the graphic design for their marketing materials. We started talking. Started talking, I repeated, nodding slowly. And that talking led to what? Coffee? Lunch? Accidentally renting an apartment together? She didn't know I was married at first, he said, which might have been the worst defense I'd ever heard. I told her I was divorced. Oh, I let out a disbelieving laugh. Oh, that's rich. That's not just lying, that's advanced level deception. That takes planning. Sustained effort. I pressed the heel of my hand to my forehead like I was checking for a fever. So you've been divorced this whole time and no one told me? That's inconsiderate. I've been living here, sleeping in your bed, doing your laundry, all while being married to a divorced man. Should I send you a congratulations card? Does Hallmark make one for surprise divorces? Nora, please. Please what? Please understand? Please forgive you? Please pretend this is somehow my fault because you were unhappy? I picked up my coffee mug, wrapping both hands around it even though it was too hot. The burn somehow felt appropriate. When exactly were you planning to tell me, Grant? Or were you just going to keep this up until one of you died? Were you planning to split your time between 2 funerals? He sank into a chair, shoulders slumping, looking completely defeated. Good. He should be. I don't know what I was thinking, he muttered. The first honest thing he'd said all evening. You weren't thinking, I corrected. That's the problem. You were feeling. You felt like you deserved 2 lives instead of fixing the one you had. You felt like you could keep your stable marriage and your exciting girlfriend without consequence. You felt like you were smart enough to pull it off forever. I took a sip of coffee, scalding my tongue but not caring. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady and cold now. You're going to sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow you're going to call a lawyer, a good one, because this marriage is over. And then, Grant, you're going to learn exactly what it feels like when someone you trust looks at you and doesn't recognize who you've become. He looked up at me, something like fear crossing his face. He should be afraid. He'd underestimated me for years. Thought I'd stay quiet, content with my little marketing job, my tidy suburban life, and my ignorance. That was his second mistake. The first had been thinking he could get away with it. The second was forgetting who he married. And he was about to make a third that would make the first two look like practice rounds. That night I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Instead, I sat in our home office, the one Grant never used because he preferred working at the office. Another lie in the encyclopedia of deceit that was my marriage. I started with the basics, our joint bank statements from the last 2 years. And there it was. A trail of breadcrumbs so blatant I couldn't believe I'd missed it. Monthly payments to Riverside Property Management. $1,200 every single month for 24 months. Then I checked our credit card records. Every Wednesday evening like clockwork. Grocery receipts, restaurant bills, even a few charges from that overpriced home goods store where people buy throw pillows that cost more than my first car. Evidence of an entire parallel life, financed with our shared money, while I'd been working late, blissfully unaware. But then things got interesting. Really interesting. The apartment wasn't under an LLC or in Lena's name. It was listed as a corporate rental through Grant's company, which meant he'd been expensing part of his affair as a business cost, client entertainment, extended stay accommodations for visiting consultants. The creativity was almost impressive if it hadn't been so deeply unethical. I pulled up his company's employee handbook and read through every section on ethics violations and fraud, taking notes and cross-referencing dates. By 3 a.m, I had a timeline that would make a forensic accountant proud. My phone buzzed. Tessa, are you awake? Stupid question. Of course she was. I'm coming over. 20 minutes later, she was sitting across from me, still in pajamas with a coat thrown over them, holding 2 coffees from the 24-hour diner near her place. Talk, she said. So I did. I told her everything, the elevator, the apartment, the 2 years of deceit happening 5 floors below where she'd soon be living. That absolute dumpster fire of a human being, Tessa said, which was pretty restrained for her. Tessa didn't bother with polite filters. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to destroy him, I said simply. But I'm going to do it legally, thoroughly, and in a way he'll never forget. Tessa grinned, not kindly. It was the grin she wore when we'd once dismantled a competitor's product launch in 48 hours. She knew exactly what I was capable of when I put my marketing brain to work. Tell me what you need, she said. What I needed was information, lots of it, preferably the kind Grant didn't know I could get. Tessa, bless her chaotic soul, happened to be friends with the building manager at her complex. They'd bonded over true crime podcasts. And building managers, as it turns out, have access to all sorts of interesting things. Lease agreements, security footage, noise complaints. By Thursday morning I had copies of everything, the lease with Grant's signature, the corporate account details paying the rent. Even better, I had 6 months of security footage showing Grant and Lena coming and going. Time-stamped. Dated. Undeniable. But I wasn't finished. I called my lawyer, not our lawyer, the one who helped with the house, but my lawyer. The woman I'd met at a Women in Business networking event, who specialized in high-conflict divorces and had a reputation for being ruthless. Her name was Dana. When I laid everything out, she actually laughed. Oh honey, she said. He's handed you everything gift-wrapped. Corporate fraud, misuse of company funds, maintaining a second household with marital assets. This is going to be fun. Fun wasn't exactly my word, but I appreciated her energy. Next stop, Grant's HR department. But not directly, that would tip him off. Instead, I reached out to an old colleague who had transferred to his company 2 years earlier. I took her to lunch, casual friendly. I casually mentioned over lunch that I was helping Grant organize some documents for tax season and needed clarification on the company's corporate housing policy. My former colleague, ever helpful, pulled up the employee handbook right there at the table and walked me through every step. The requirements for claiming corporate housing expenses, the supporting documentation, the approval process, the auditing trail. By the time she finished, I didn't even need to ask the next question. Grant had forged signatures, falsified expense reports, and created fake consultant profiles to justify the costs. It wasn't just unethical. It was actual prosecutable fraud. And the best part? He'd been sloppy. He hadn't even tried to cover his tracks because he'd assumed no one would ever look. That was mistake number 3. He assumed I wouldn't dig. That I'd be too heartbroken, too shocked, or too proud to sift through the ugliness. By Friday, I had a file 3 inches thick, bank statements, credit card records, lease agreements, security footage, and email threads I'd found in our shared cloud storage between Grant and Lena discussing furniture purchases and utility bills. I even had text message screenshots from his phone, still conveniently logged into our home computer. I photographed everything and made 3 copies. One for my lawyer, one for my own records, and one for what was about to become the most unforgettable corporate event in his company's history. Because here's the thing about working in marketing: you understand optics. You understand timing. You understand how to craft a message that no one can ignore. And as luck would have it, Grant's company anniversary dinner was scheduled for the following Wednesday. A black tie event at the country club, the whole roster of executives, department heads, HR, the CEO, partners. And yes, Lena would be there too. According to Grant's not-so-private calendar, he'd invited her as his +1, under the guise of networking opportunities. The audacity bordered on artistic. Tessa and I spent the weekend preparing the presentation. We turned my evidence into a sleek, professional deck, the kind I'd normally design for high-value client pitches. We built charts showing the financial timeline, spreadsheets breaking down every fraudulent expense, photographs of the apartment with timestamps, and side-by-side comparisons of business trip dates against security footage of him entering and leaving the building. It was meticulous, devastating, beautiful in its own cold way. "This is gorgeous," Tessa said when we finished. "Devastating but gorgeous. You're going to ruin him." "I'm going to let him ruin himself," I corrected. "I'm just providing the materials." Sunday night, Dana called with news that nearly made me drop my phone. Lena had reached out to her own lawyer, asking questions about paternity rights and child support. Child support. Lena was pregnant. I sat down, stood up, and sat back down again. Then poured a glass of wine that I never actually drank, just held while the information settled in. "How far along?" I asked. "About 12 weeks, Dana said, according to what she told her attorney. Which meant Grant had known for at least a month. Probably longer. A month. He'd known he was going to be a father with another woman, and hadn't said a single word. He'd come home every night, kissed me, asked about my day, all while keeping that secret tucked behind his polite smiles. The laugh that came out of me sounded slightly deranged, even to my own ears. "Nora," Dana asked carefully, "you okay?" "I'm perfect," I said flatly. "Add it to the file. Make sure we have proof of when he found out versus when he planned to tell me, which I'm guessing was never." "Already on it," she replied. "This just keeps getting better." Better wasn't the word I'd use. But it certainly made Wednesday's dinner more interesting. By Monday and Tuesday, a strange calm had settled over me. I went to work, smiled at people, did my job. Grant and I barely spoke. He slept in the guest room, left early, came home late, probably spending his evenings reassuring Lena that everything would somehow work out. Wednesday morning, I got dressed with precision. The black structured shoulder dress that made me look like I could either run a Fortune 500 company or burn one down depending on my mood. Pearl earrings. The good heels. Polished. Untouchable. Grant looked startled when I came downstairs. "You're coming tonight?" he asked cautiously. "Of course," I said pleasantly. "Wouldn't miss it. It's your company's anniversary. A big night. Important celebration." He hesitated, as if debating whether to object, then simply nodded. "Great," he said weakly. "That's great." I smiled. The kind of smile that photographs well but never reaches your eyes. "It's going to be a night no one forgets." I promised and meant it. The country club looked exactly like every country club in America. Understated luxury that costs a fortune to maintain. Waiters in bow ties carried trays of champagne worth more per glass than most people make in an hour. The ballroom was filled with executives pretending they weren't quietly measuring themselves against one another's success. Grant's company had reserved the main hall. Round tables draped in white linen. Centerpieces of orchids twisted with curly willow branches someone decided looked modern. A small stage stood ready for speeches and awards. The bar was already 3 deep with guests getting an early start. I arrived separately, which raised a few eyebrows but not enough suspicion. I smiled easily and told anyone who asked that I'd come straight from a client meeting. A believable lie, easily accepted. Tessa was stationed near the back, stunning in a deep red dress, her phone discreetly ready in case things needed documenting. She caught my eye and gave a subtle thumbs up. Grant stood near the bar, stiff and uncomfortable in his tuxedo. And beside him Lena. She wore a navy dress that might have been elegant, if not for the context. She had that faint pregnancy glow that everyone romanticizes, radiant and nauseating all at once. They hadn't seen me yet. I watched them for a moment, the way his hand rested possessively on the small of her back, the way she laughed, brushing his arm. They looked normal. Happy even. Like every other couple in the room who hadn't built their relationship on deception and fraud. I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I needed something to hold. Something to keep my hands busy, so I wouldn't do something impulsive before the main event. The company president, a man named Richard, who had always struck me as reasonably intelligent until the day he decided to hire Grant, took the stage around 8 o'clock to open the evening's program. His speech was full of the usual corporate buzzwords about innovation, integrity, and dedication. The kind of phrases that sound impressive but translate to nothing. Then came the awards. Employee of the Quarter, Sales Team Recognition. The endless backpatting that made these dinners drag on 2 hours longer than necessary. And of course Grant won one. Outstanding Regional Sales Manager. Commended for consistent performance and dedication to client relationships. The irony was so thick you could slice it with the dull dinner knives provided for the overcooked chicken breasts everyone was pretending to enjoy. He walked up to the stage, accepted his crystal trophy, and launched into a speech about teamwork and commitment, thanking his company, his colleagues, everyone except me. Not even a glance in my direction. But he did look at Lena, and the small smile he gave her made my blood pressure spike. When he returned to his table, I stood up and walked toward the front. Tessa's eyes widened. Showtime. Excuse me, I said loudly enough for the microphone to catch, but calmly enough to sound professional. Richard. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I have something important to share with everyone. It concerns corporate integrity and transparency. Since those were buzzwords you mentioned earlier, I figured this was the perfect moment. Richard looked puzzled. Grant looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Around the room a ripple of uneasy motion, that collective awareness that something was about to go very, very wrong. I'm Nora Ellis, I continued, steady and poised. Some of you may know me as Grant Ellis's wife, but I'm also a marketing professional, and I strongly believe in the power of an effective presentation. So tonight I've prepared one for you. Consider it a small gift, an educational experience about what happens when personal ethics and corporate policy have an irreconcilable difference of opinion. I pulled a USB drive from my clutch. One of the event coordinators, bless his confused heart, actually helped me plug it into the system. The large projection screens on either side of the stage flickered to life. What is this? Richard asked, looking between me and Grant. A case study, I said pleasantly, about expense fraud, corporate housing policy violations, and the importance of verifying documentation your employees submit. Grant, honey, you might want to sit down for this. The first slide appeared, a clean title card. The Hidden Costs of Dishonesty, a Comprehensive Review. Grant stood, moving toward the stage. Nora, don't. Don't what? I asked mildly. Don't share public information? Don't present verified evidence? Don't embarrass you in front of your colleagues and your pregnant girlfriend sitting at table 7, looking increasingly confused? Lena's face drained of color. Gasps scattered around the room. The word pregnant hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't quite finished detonating. Richard raised a hand. Mrs. Ellis, I'm not sure this is appropriate. Oh, it's absolutely not appropriate, I agreed smoothly. Just like maintaining a secret apartment on company funds, while falsifying expense reports isn't appropriate. But here we are. Shall we continue? I clicked to the next slide, the timeline. Every fraudulent expense from the past 2 years highlighted in red. Dates, amounts, categories all cross-referenced with Grant's actual calendar, proving he wasn't where he claimed to be. As you can see, I narrated, my tone as even as if I were pitching a new campaign. These expenses began approximately 24 months ago. Interestingly, that's exactly when Grant met Lena at a client event and decided to expand his living arrangements. The apartment in question is located at Riverside Towers, 5th floor, rented through your corporate housing program under false pretenses. Next slide. The lease agreement, complete with forged signatures and fabricated consultant data. Here we have documentation claiming a consultant named Ethan Cross required extended housing for a 6-month project. That project somehow lasted 2 years. Plot twist. Ethan Cross doesn't exist. But Lena Cross does. She's the designer sitting right over there, likely wondering how her boyfriend managed to afford a downtown apartment on a freelancer's income. Lena stood abruptly, knocking over her water glass. Grant, what is she talking about? Sit down, I said gently. This involves you too, especially the part about child support calculations. Spoiler alert. They'll be based on Grant's real income, not whatever inflated figure he gave you. The room was silent except for the steady clicking of my slides. Security footage filled the screens. Grant and Lena entering and leaving the building, shopping, acting like any other couple, confident that no one was watching. Richard, I continued conversationally, I've already forwarded all of this to your HR and legal departments, along with detailed documentation of the internal policy violations. I believe Section 12, Paragraph 4 of your employee handbook covers fraud and misrepresentation, if anyone wants to check later. Grant had gone gray, literally gray, as though blood had abandoned his body. You can't do this, he said weakly. Already did, I corrected. Past tense. It's done. And everything I've shared is factual, documented, and entirely legal, which is more than I can say for your expense reports over the last 2 years. Richard was now whispering urgently with 2 executives at the front, one clearly from HR, judging by the way she was glaring at Grant like he'd personally insulted her profession. I advanced to the final slide. A simple statement in bold white letters on black. Transparency matters. Integrity matters. And karma has impeccable timing. Thank you all for your attention, I said, disconnecting the USB drive and placing it neatly into Richard's hand. The full report, including financial totals of the misused funds, is on there. By my calculation, it's roughly $38,000 over 2 years. But who's counting? Besides the IRS, of course. Then I walked off the stage. The room stayed frozen. That suspended, stunned silence where no one quite knows how to react. Tessa was at the back, recording everything, barely suppressing her grin. As I passed Grant's table, I paused and looked at Lena, whose tears streaked down her cheeks. For what it's worth, I said softly. He told me you didn't know he was married. I actually believe that. So here's some free advice: get a good lawyer, make sure the paternity test happens legally, and maybe run a background check on the next man before things get serious. Then I walked out of that ballroom with my head high and my evidence delivered, leaving behind the smoldering remains of Grant's career, his reputation, and his carefully constructed double life. Tessa caught up to me in the parking lot, breathless and exhilarated. That was the most savage thing I've ever witnessed, she said. And I once saw you annihilate a competitor's product launch with a single press release. This was more personal, I admitted. My phone buzzed, Dana calling. Please tell me you recorded that, she said without preamble. Tessa got everything. Perfect, Dana replied. Because Grant's about to have some very expensive legal problems coming his way. Corporate fraud, potential criminal charges, and now a very public custody situation. He really should have thought this through, Dana said over the phone. I leaned against my car, suddenly exhausted. Is it wrong that I feel good about this? Honey, she said gently. That man stole from you, lied to you, and built an entire second life while making you question your reality. Feeling good about exposing the truth isn't wrong. It's healthy. The next morning, Grant was fired. By noon, the story had spread through Charlotte's business community like wildfire. By the end of the week, 3 more employees had come forward with concerns about his expense reports, and the company had launched a full internal audit. Lena reached out through her lawyer. She wanted to meet, said she had questions. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral ground. She looked tired, uneasy, about 4 months pregnant now, showing just enough that strangers might still wonder if she was bloated or expecting. "I didn't know," were her first words. "I know," I said, and strangely enough I meant it. We talked for 2 hours. She told me everything. How Grant had pursued her, told her he was divorced, and painted himself as the heartbroken man ready to start fresh. How he'd been planning to propose next month, had even shown her rings. It would have been almost tragic if it hadn't been so predictable. "What are you going to do?" I asked finally. "Have the baby," she said simply. "Make him pay child support. And never again trust anyone who can't introduce me to their friends and family." "Fair enough," I said. 6 months after the country club debacle, now infamously known across Charlotte's business circles as the Ellis presentation, I was sitting in my new loft on the 8th floor of a building 3 blocks from where all of this began, sipping coffee and reading my finalized divorce decree. The irony of living in another loft conversion wasn't lost on me. Same exposed brick, same industrial charm as Tessa's place. Except mine had better natural light and zero chance of running into my ex-husband in the elevator. I'd made sure of that before signing the lease. As for Grant, he'd moved back in with his parents in Greensboro, a 36-year-old man living in his childhood bedroom after setting fire to his career, his marriage, and his finances in spectacular fashion. His LinkedIn profile still read, "Exploring new opportunities," which is corporate code for unemployable after committing fraud. The divorce settlement had been surprisingly straightforward once the criminal charges entered the picture. Dana negotiated from such a position of strength that Grant's lawyer basically showed up just to sign the papers. I got the house, which I promptly sold because living in our suburban dream home felt like wandering through a museum of my own denial. I received 70% of our joint assets. I got to keep my dignity and my sense of humor, which honestly felt like the bigger victory. Grant got debt, unemployment, and a child support obligation that would begin the moment Lena gave birth in 3 months. Speaking of Lena, she'd become an unexpected constant in my life. Not a friend exactly, but something close to it. A fellow survivor of Grant's particular brand of deceit. We'd meet for coffee occasionally, usually when she needed to vent about the realities of single motherhood, or wanted advice on how to maximize the legal and financial consequences for the father of her child. He asked if he could be in the delivery room, she told me one Tuesday afternoon, her tone hovering between disbelief and exhaustion. She was 7 months pregnant then, glowing in that rare genuine way people talk about. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That he could watch the video once my lawyer approves the footage," she said dryly. "He seems to think we're going to co-parent like some kind of modern family, as if I'll forget he spent 2 years lying to both of us." I raised my cup in mock salute. To men who confuse consequences with persecution. She clinked her decaf against mine. And to women who document everything. The blog I'd started had taken off faster than I ever expected. Renovating After Ruin, a marketing professional's guide to divorce, began as therapy, a way to process everything by turning chaos into content. Turns out thousands of women knew exactly what it felt like to discover their lives weren't what they thought they were. The podcast came next. Weekly episodes where I interviewed other women who'd survived different shades of betrayal and built something stronger from the wreckage. We talked about the practical things, lawyers, finances, real estate, but also the emotional archaeology of reclaiming your identity after someone you trusted systematically dismantled it. Tessa co-hosted sometimes, offering commentary and making sure I didn't drift too far into cynicism. She'd moved out of the building where everything started, saying the energy there was cursed, though we both knew she just wanted better closet space. Ironically, my marketing career had thrived through all of it. Turns out, publicly dismantling your cheating husband's double life with a meticulously designed presentation makes you unforgettable in professional circles. Within months of the divorce, I'd received 3 job offers. I accepted the one that came with a corner office, a 20% raise, and a team that appreciated someone who understood how to deliver a message with precision and impact. The house sold within 2 weeks. A young couple bought it, newly engaged, glowing with the optimism that their love would be different, lasting. I didn't tell them what had happened there. I didn't want to curse their hope. Let them learn in their own time. I kept the coffee maker though. It was a good one. No reason to give up quality appliances just because your marriage implodes. Richard, Grant's former boss, reached out about a month after the company dinner. He apologized for not noticing the fraud sooner and thanked me for bringing it to light in such a memorable fashion. The company had since overhauled its expense policies, implemented tighter oversight, and in a twist of poetic justice, hired me as a consultant to redesign their corporate communications on ethics and integrity. The irony of being paid to teach Grant's former company about honesty wasn't lost on anyone. Now, sitting in my 8th-floor loft, coffee in hand, my podcast thriving, and my hard-won peace intact, I can almost say I'm grateful that the elevator stopped on the 5th floor that day. Almost because that moment, as devastating as it was, revealed something vital. I'd been living only half a life, accepting crumbs and convincing myself it was a feast. The version of Nora that existed before that Tuesday was smaller, more willing to overlook red flags, more invested in preserving the illusion of happiness than actually pursuing it. She would have forgiven him eventually, probably gone to therapy and tried to work through it, pretending that betrayal could be discussed out of existence with enough communication and commitment. But this version of me knows better. She knows that some things can't be fixed because they were never truly working to begin with. She knows that loving someone doesn't mean tolerating their damage. She knows that the best revenge isn't mirroring their cruelty. It's building something they can't touch, can't ruin, and can't claim as theirs. Grant still texts occasionally, practical things he should be discussing with his lawyer, and sometimes late-night messages that begin with "I've been thinking," and end with apologies that arrive about 2 years too late to matter. I don't respond. I said everything that needed saying in that country club ballroom. 3 inches of documentation and a room full of witnesses to the truth. These days, when I step into an elevator, I smile. Not because I've forgotten, but because I finally understand something Grant never did. The best stories aren't about the disasters that break you, but about what you build from the pieces. And mine's only just getting started. Turns out, when life hands you a cheating husband and a secret apartment, you don't just make lemonade. You build an empire. You document everything. And you never apologize for being the protagonist of your own story. The elevator doors close. I press the button for the 8th floor. Somewhere between the lobby and my destination, I realize I'm not angry anymore. Not bitter, not even particularly sad about what I lost. Because what I gained was worth infinitely more. The unshakable knowledge that I am the kind of woman who doesn't just survive betrayal. I weaponize it into wisdom, turn pain into profit, and refuse to make the same mistake twice. Grant got his second family, his fraud charges, his unemployment, and his lifelong child support obligations. I got my freedom, and that's a trade I'd make every single time.